Welcome back to my channel at The Movie Optimist, where I find the silver linings in even the worst of films. Tonight, I just got done watching the newest film, Novocaine, starring Jack Quade and Amber Midthunder. In this film, Jack Quade essentially plays a mild-mannered man. He's pretty much like Bubble Boy, the movie with Jake Gyllenhaal from a long time ago, where he, lives in a bubble, except in this movie, he doesn't live in a bubble. He just probably should with the way he lives. He essentially has this autoimmune disease where he doesn't feel pain, which sounds cool in theory if you were like a superhero or a boxer and you could use that as an edge in a fight. But here, he's just, like I said, a mild-mannered man, and not being able to feel pain is actually more of a burden than anything else, because if he scratches himself and he doesn't feel it, it can cause infection, which he won't feel, and that could get really bad. If he stubs his leg into the corner of a desk or something like that and bruises it and it has internal bleeding and he doesn't feel it, well, he can lose his leg. He could literally do something as simple as biting his tongue off and not even realizing it because, again, his body doesn't feel pain, and then he would just bleed out and die without knowing why. And because of this, he lives very cautiously. He has tennis balls on the edges of all of his counters in his house and like the desk and the nightstands. He only eats like smoothies because he's afraid if he eats solid foods, he will accidentally chew his tongue off and die. And he lives like a Melvin, kind of. He works at a bank as an assistant manager.
Dwight Schrute, assistant regional manager.
And it's a very safe desk job. He's not doing like construction or an electrician or anything that puts his body at risk. He's really just sitting behind a desk. He lives very much a life of solitude where he doesn't really go out and ever do anything that puts himself at risk, whereas in something like going to the bar would be normal for someone like me and you, or going out to eat would be normal for someone like me and you. But for him, he'd rather just sit home and play video games with his one friend that he has that he's never actually met before. He only knows them from online video games. Anyway, he winds up meeting Amber Midthunder, who is a new employee at his job, and they wind up really hitting it off. She invites him out to lunch one day. After accidentally spilling coffee on him and burning his hand, she felt bad, so she invited him out. And they just click. They wind up going out that night. They go to like this art gallery and they have a good time. They bond. He falls head over heels in love with her because of how cool of a character she is. And they spend the night together. And they do a really good job getting you to care about the two of them as characters. And the next day, when he goes to work, before he could tell her how much of a good time he had, the place winds up getting held up by bank robbers dressed as Santa Claus. They force Jack Quade to let them into the vault to steal all the money, but before they flee the scene, when the cops show up, they decide to take a hostage, and yes, it's Amber Midthunder's character. After all the cops are killed by the bank robbers, Jack Quade learns that the backup is very far from getting onto the scene, and statistically speaking, hostages are killed within the first hour of being kidnapped, so when he realizes the cops aren't going to get there in time to help save her, he decides to take matters into his own hands and pursue the bank robbers himself. And that's essentially this movie. It's Jack Quade going after these people, investigating, trying to figure out where they took her and trying to save her life. Now, I'll say this right off the bat, this movie is an action movie that has a gimmick like so many that you've seen before it. I relate this movie a lot to the movie Crank with Jason Statham, where he has to keep his heart rate elevated at all times, otherwise he dies, so he keeps doing crazy, absurd things like having sex in front of a ton of people, or electrocuting himself, or just all these different things to keep his heart rate elevated. There's a gimmick that you follow throughout the entirety of that film, and it just feels like they hit the pedal to the metal and they never let up. This movie is a lot like Crank in a lot of ways, where there is that gimmick that he can't feel pain, and it makes for a lot of really funny moments throughout this film where he's put in a lot of situations where most people would get hurt and give up, or the pain would be too much and they would give up, and he kind of just brushes it off like it's a gust of wind on his skin. He gets hit in the back with a spiked ball from a booby trap and he just brushes it off. He gets shot in the leg with an arrow and he just brushes it off because he doesn't feel it. It doesn't hurt him. And that's not spoilers. You do see those in the trailer. And that's part of the fun of the movie. That's kind of what you're buying a ticket to go see. It's what kind of scenarios are they going to keep throwing at Jack Quade that he's going to overcome, because he's essentially a superhuman where he could just withstand the most brutal of things happening to him.
Oh, no, stop it. Oh. Wow, that hurt. That one hurt the most.
He starts this movie as a very mild-mannered, quiet, scared-of-the-world guy, and by the end of this movie, he's like a war vet, hardened badass that, again, went from somebody that didn't want to leave his apartment to a guy that's literally willing to kill in the name of love. Like, that's how much he cares about this girl. That being said, on to Jack Quade and his performance. When I first saw him in The Hunger Games, and I realized he was Dennis Quaid's son, I thought, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. Like, you know, his dad is obviously getting him work in the industry. He wasn't in The Hunger Games a lot, so I didn't really have enough to form an opinion on him. But then he was cast as Huey in The Boys, and I love him in The Boys. He's one of my favorite characters in that show. He's essentially playing the same character here that he's playing in that, just a little bit more badass. But I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. He's just playing a more heightened, more badass version of Huey. Really, I was excited to see this movie after seeing Jack Quaid in Companion, which was actually only a few months ago. I mean, he was also in Oppenheimer, which I liked him in, but it was such a small role that it wasn't really enough of a fix for me to get excited for more Jack Quaid movies. It's really a mix of The Boys and Companion, which was an excellent little dark comedy horror film. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's fantastic. But it got me really excited to see what Jack Quaid does next. And although he's essentially playing that same quirky, everyday man kind of character in this film, he does get a chance to shine in the aspect of he doesn't have a lot of roles where he's just a certifiable badass here. And I think on one hand, yes, he's really charismatic, but in the fight scenes and the action scenes, he was also really excellent here. And I love seeing actors break the norm of what they're known for. Like, I love when I see Adam Sandler in a serious movie. He's so good at it and he doesn't do it enough. It's the same thing here with Jack Quaid. You expect him to act like Huey, and he does, but then he evolves from that, and he has a really great arc in this film. Jacob Batalon is also in this film, and if you don't know who that is, it's Ned from the Spider-Man films. He is also a very similar character to Ned in this film, where he is Jack Quaid's best friend. Although they never met before, they're only friends over online video games, but once shit hits the fan and Jack Quaid needs essentially a man in the chair, Ned kind of comes out and helps him a little bit and even gets in on some of the action. And it was really fun to see him here because I haven't really seen Jacob in anything other than the Spider-Man films. And I think like one film on Netflix that was really forgettable. But he was really fun watching here too. Amber Midthunder, nobody knows who she is, especially if you haven't seen the Prey film on Hulu, which was absolutely fantastic. She's really great here too, although I thought she was a little underutilized. She has amazing on-screen chemistry with Jack Quaid. Like, their romance, you just buy it. They are so good together. But she is abducted in the beginning of this film after like the first 15 to 20 minutes, and then she's just the hostage. So she doesn't really get a lot to do. And from a story aspect, like, I can't blame the story. That's the gimmick. Obviously, she was kidnapped, so she can't really do much other than sit there. So that was a little disappointing because I really wanted to see her have a lot more to do. She does get in a little bit on the action at the very end and show her fighting chops that she showed in the Prey film, but I would have loved more from her. There's also Betty Gabriel from Jack Ryan and Get Out. She was also in Upgrade and The Purge election year. I really like her, and I don't think she's in enough movies. She is a fantastic actress, and she, again, is great in this movie in the very small amount of screen time that she has. She plays the cop that's investigating all of the horrendous acts of violence that are following in the wake of Jack Quaid trying to find his girlfriend. But she's only in the movie for maybe a total of like 15 minutes trying to hunt him down and talk Jack Quaid off a ledge. She's kind of a little understanding of the fact that he's just trying to save somebody that he loves and he's not really a bad guy, but she's also a cop and like trying to talk him out of continuously killing people. I just wish it got a little bit more of her. And as much as I love Jack Quaid in this movie, I thought he was excellent. His comedic timing was incredible. His fight scenes were really well done. He did a lot of his own stunts. I love the fact that he talked about how he had to unlearn the act of acting like you're in pain, and essentially when people are doing things like hitting him or punching him or stabbing him or shooting him, he just had to be like unfazed by it, and it was really funny. He is definitely the star of this movie. But the standout out here, and I had no idea that this was a thing prior to looking at the IMDb for this film. But Jack Nicholson's son is the main bad guy in this movie, and holy shit, now that I know it's his son, when I was watching the movie and he was on screen, I was like, man, this guy seems so familiar. And yeah, it's Jack Nicholson's son. He has his eyes, man. Like, he plays that crazy eyes the way that Jack Nicholson did with that big smile in all of his iconic films. It's literally like to a T. Like, he plays it so well. He's so menacing and otherwise a very cookie cutter, forgettable performance. Like, he's just kind of like a basic bad guy that's a little crazy, but because it's Jack Nicholson's son, like, you just can't take your eyes off him when he's on screen. There's something so menacing about him, and even though, again, he didn't have much to do other than be a typical bad guy, he elevated it to heights that it had no right to be, and I absolutely loved every time he was on screen. I had no idea what he was going to do next. He was so unpredictable, and I hope we get a lot more from him, because in the few roles that I've seen him in, this, and I saw him in Smile, but I didn't know who he was in Smile, just that he was really creepy. This guy needs a starring role, man. If he is this good in 10 minutes of screen time across 2 movies. I can't imagine what he would do with like a meaty, juicy drama that he could really sink his teeth into. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say this movie's perfect. This movie is hella corny. Some of the dialogue is not written well. The direction is excellent. All the performances, the arcs from all the characters, the fight scenes, the action, the stuff that you're showing up for, the fact that Jack Quaid can't feel pain, it's all done really well. But the dialogue felt like it was written by a newbie, by like an 18-year-old that was at a bar with his friends and just got a little too drunk and they were telling jokes and they thought it was funny, so they threw it in the movie. There's a lot of funny moments in this film, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it doesn't come from the jokes they tell, but more so the reactions from people seeing Jack Quaid get impaled with things and he's just like, yeah, no, I'm good, don't worry about it. And like, those are the moments of funny. It's like body comedy. Whereas in, like I said, yeah, some of the jokes, the dialogue that came out of people's mouths when they were trying to be serious, it was just cringy sometimes. And I thought that the detective, not the main one played by Betty Gabriel, but her partner played by Matt Walsh, he felt like a satirical version of the character who was actually trying to play. Like, he was supposed to be a drunk of a detective. He just didn't want to be there on the job. He was just over it. He was judgmental. He was kind of an asshole, but he felt like an SNL version of it where he was trying to make fun of that type of character. And I think the writer and directors wanted to play it off like he was comical, but he was just kind of cringy to me. It just didn't fit the role the way I think they thought it was going to. So anytime he was kind of like talking or doing something, I was like, all right, let's get past this and get back to Jack Quaid rolling around in glass. At the end of the day, this movie worked as well as it did because of this genius gimmick of this dude can't feel pain, and you couple that with the fact that he's kind of like a nerdy nobody and has to become a badass with that gimmick. It just made for a really entertaining movie with a really endearing cast and an excellent lead performance from Jack Quaid. If you're an action junkie or you like films like Crank or Speed or Transporter or anything like that, that's just like over the top body violence, like this movie is hard R-rated. There's some serious violence in this. And I think you're really going to enjoy this film just like I did. I'm going to give this movie an 8 out of 10. Is it the Shawshank Redemption of action movies? No, but it knows what it is and it does it really well. The creators definitely had a blast making this, as well as all the actors on screen. It was funny, it was action-packed, it had a great arc, great character dynamics. You believed that the 2 lead characters truly fell in love. It had some nice twists and turns in there, and it made for just a really good Christmas-themed action adventure. And I am super excited to see what both Amber Midthunder, Jack Quaid, and Jack Nicholson's son, I keep saying that because I don't know his name, I should have IMDb'd it before doing this, but whatever, sue me. I can't wait to see what they do next. Anyway, guys, have I given you a reason to go to the movies this weekend to see it? If I have, I would love to talk about it. I hope you show up and support movies like this because we don't get them that often, these lower budget action adventures, and if we don't show up and support them, we're not going to keep getting them. And in a world where everything is overrun, and don't get me wrong, I love superhero movies, but I also love chicken, but that doesn't mean I can have chicken every night. Sometimes I need to have a steak or some turkey. It's like that with movies too. I love my superhero movies. I love my big $200 million blockbuster action adventures like Blade Runner. But sometimes you need these lower budgeted movies that are more artistic and they have these wildly over the top ideas like A Man That Feels No Pain. So go out and support this movie if you enjoy this review. And if you do, please give me a like and a subscribe. Let's talk about it in the comments down below. And as always, guys, I hope you have a great rest of your weekend and I'll catch you next time.